Hello everyone, it is Joe here from Omnipoke, the channel that brings you guys everything Pokemon. If you're looking for PTCGO codes, including the stuff from Vivid Voltage, make sure you go ahead and check out the Potown store. You can get a 5% discount on your orders using that code Omnipoke. For today's video, I'm going to be giving you my initial impressions on the Champions Cube for the Cube League. This is the sort of Worlds format style event where you accumulate points to try and get into the Champions Cube tournament, and that's the tournament that's going to be run over the weekend. And next weekend, it's going to be Connor Lavelle's cube, and it's a really unique and interesting one with a ton of strange counts that aren't really seen in many cubes, so it's going to be a very different drafting experience for me. I've never drafted a cube like this before. There's some specific rules in there that we're going to be going over, and then I'm going to be giving you my thoughts on my sort of drafting tactics and what I think I need to look out for as the draft progresses, what sort of strategies I'm going to try and build up. So we'll start on his little rules landing page, because that's going to give us a good feel of what the cube's all about. And like I said, it's quite different to a lot of other cubes in how it's kind of constructed. So we'll jump straight into it. First of all, there are SP level X Pokemon in the draft, and if you draft one of these level X's, you are then given 2 of the basics of that level X. So essentially, drafting one level X card gives you that line set all in one pick, which makes me think that SP level X's are already probably quite good because they're fast, aggressive, and get on the board quickly. But also it means like that's 3 cards in one pick, which is a lot of value compared to when you're drafting stage 2 lines. You're having to get the corresponding basics in stage 1s as you go, which take away from your consistency picks or your greed picks or staying flexible picks. All of these things are really important in the drafting process. So picking up SP level X's is insane value, because as soon as you pick up one level X, you know that they can instantly go into your deck as like a 3-card package, which is excellent. And for this cube exactly, there's a lot of synergy or a lot of help towards level X cards. I think there's like 3 or 4 Premier Balls, which lets you recycle the level X card if it gets knocked out, or give you early search for it in the opening turns. So straight away, I see that and I think SP level X is probably going to be highly contested and probably very powerful. We'll talk about the ones later. Other level X's are also in the draft. So like I said, level X's is a bit of a mini theme going on in the cube. And they're present in a 2/2 line or thicker for other basic Pokemon. So I think there's things like Regigigas level X and Shaman level X, those sorts of guys. They're going to show up in the cube in 2/2 lines or more. But you know, picking up the level X for everyone else doesn't give you the corresponding basics. It's only the SP Pokemon. So making SPs even stronger is a bold call, but there we go. There's no limitation to the number of cards with the same name you can play in your deck, which is actually quite helpful for things like the sort of level X rule that we used to be aware of. There are 2 Garchomp Cs in the cube, or Garchomp C level X's, I should say. If someone is able to draft both of them, they can get 2 Garchomp C level X's and 4 Garchomp Cs, whereas previously level X's had like the same name as the card, so you could only play a 2/2 line of Garchomp C level X. So in theory, if I draft both Garchomps, and I'm going to be looking for them, I will try and play a 4/2 line of Garchomp C and make that the build around. Here's another huge thing. All players can include up to 4 special darkness energy in addition to any they may have drafted in their deck. So essentially, all the drafters start off in their card pool with 4 special darks. Special darks gives you an extra 10 damage buff to the dark Pokemon they're attached to, which means that we're naturally just thinking that all the dark Pokemon that we draft could, in theory, have extra modifications on top of them as they go. It also means there's a higher likelihood that there's going to be some type coverage stuff working towards the dark Pokemon. So think about fighting types potentially being more appealing. Think about psychic types or ghost types that are weak to dark being less appealing, because they're going to be hit for weakness more often and more aggressively in the early turns. Even things like random Murkrows that do 1 for 20 with a special dark attached, that's 1 for 30, and then weakness on top means like your Ghastly is getting knocked out, or your Shuppet, or those other sorts of cards. So that makes me quite wary of the ghost types that are in here, and makes me think more critically about the dark Pokemon, because I'm naturally getting a huge advantage for playing dark types just from the offset. There's also a specific ruling to exactly one card where a Mighty Enna EX is not going to give up 2 prize cards. We'll look at that card later. Just a small balancing thing. Like, there's no reason for that card to give up 2 prize cards. Now it's actually a draftable card because it's down to 1 prize card. But that does lead into another mini rule. Evolved Pokemon with 140 or more hit points are considered 2 prize Pokemon, excluding the level X and the break Pokemon. So the breaks still only give up 1 prize, the level X's still only give up 1 prize, so you're not getting punished for growing your hit points in that regard. But if they naturally have a raw 140 hit points, they give up 2 prize cards, the same as EX Pokemon. So that's really important. Cards that modify the maximum hit points, like Big Charm, do not cause that effect. So it's only the raw stats on the card that can make this applicable. And there are also capital EX and lowercase EX Pokemon in the draft. They all give up 2 prize cards as well as those 140 hit point Pokemon. So more than just a 1 prize trade off all the time. There are going to be, in theory, higher power level cards that are going to be capital EX or lowercase EX that give up 2 prize cards. So definitely something to consider in terms of thinking about your attackers and trying to map a game plan. So the first turn rules are Diamond and Pearl era. That means we both set up, then we flip a coin. Whoever wins that coin flip, in air quotes, is forced to begin the game. The person going first is unable to play trainers, supporters, or stadiums, but they do draw for turn and they can attack. And of course, they have the advantage in terms of being able to evolve first as well, of course. So that means that I want to try and get some helpful early game basics if I can. I don't think there are actually that many in the draft. But it also means any basic Pokemon that have 1 or 0 energy attack costs become even more valuable because you want to have those Call for Family style effects just so that you don't get donked and lose the game. Now, it is a best of 3, and the player the player sets up before determining who goes first. Yeah, okay, so the person who loses obviously gets to choose whether or not they'd like to begin the game. They set up first, they get to look at their hand and then go, okay, this is a good going first hand, or okay, I really need to use the supporter, I'll go second, kind of thing. So that's cool. There's also a Gentleman's Mulligan, which I think is really helpful when you play the Diamond and Pearl rules specifically, in that even if you have a starting basic, you can show your opponent your hand, say, I don't want to play with this one, and shuffle it back in and get a fresh 7. So even if they did have a viable basic, but yeah, and your opponent doesn't get the card draw either. So it's a nice way to just prevent those donks. Rare Candy is post errata, which means you can't put down a basic, then Candy evolve, or it doesn't mean you can Candy into a stage 1. So it's current rules of Rare Candy. Leveling up cannot reduce the maximum hit points of Pokemon. So you essentially, I don't know what level X's this is specifically in reference to from memory, but essentially you just choose the highest hit points of the 2, which is just, again, making level X's slightly better. All cards before and after the Diamond and Pearl era refer to trainer cards as items, supporters, and stadiums, but all cards printed in the Diamond and Pearl era refer only to item cards. So everything outside of Diamond and Pearl, it's splitting them up, right? And trainers only refer to item cards of the Diamond and Pearl era. So I think this is specifically important to Kabutops that's in the draft, and I think there's also Spiritomb with Keystone Seal in the draft. I think it's Keystone Steel. I can't remember. Darkness Grace, Spiritomb anyway. For some item lock, and essentially this is saying it's trying to make it only item lock, not stopping supporters and stadiums as well, which makes a lot of sense. Dark Pokemon and trainer names are ignored, but obviously you can't evolve into SP Pokemon. Abilities are split into powers and bodies, and if something's referencing abilities, it also interacts with them, but essentially the way they're intended to be played. So if you're shutting off a Poké Power, it's only the active abilities. If you're shutting off a Poké Body or interacting with a body, you're only interacting with passive abilities at the same time, if that makes sense. So yeah. Supporters can remain in play until the end of each player's turn. That's fine. That's basically just the same as the Diamond Pearl era. Lusamine cannot get itself back with Porygon 2's download ability. So that's good. And it just tries to make things less infinite in terms of a control style. Lusamine and Sinlin cannot retrieve each other either. So essentially we don't have 2 Lusamines in the draft is kind of the idea. to stop that cycle. Control looks niche, but possible, and I do think control is reasonable, and I will keep an eye out for some of these cards, specifically Porygon 2 from Great Encounters. I think download is an enabler for a control archetype in this deck. Burn is old rules, so you don't get the guaranteed 2 damage. You flip the coin first, which is a shame. Status conditions are a big theme in the draft. Multiple conductivity. Poker bodies can stack, so that's to do with Ampharos, which is in the draft. Conductivity does place damage counters when your opponent does stuff, so that's fine. And any card that searches basics or evolutions can also search for level X's, which I think is also really nice. It just means that, like I said earlier, there's a big advantage to be playing level X's in this draft specifically, and now they're even more searchable. So if you have some basic ball search cards like a quick ball in hand, you could also get an SP level X Pokemon by the way that this is worded. Or if you have Evo Incense, you can go ahead and get like Gengar level X, those sorts of things, which I think is a pretty cool deal. So yeah, those are the specific rules. Things to really bear in mind: SPs seem broken, and dark types have a big draw towards them for sure. Other than that, have to be a little bit concerned, or when I'm building the deck, I have to be very aware of the turn 1 rules and that I will be forced to go first a number of times. So I want to try and pad out my deck with ball search cards, not just supporters. And also a raw amounts of high Pokemon so I don't just get donked. So yeah, let's look at the draft itself then. So the cube list is in full here, but luckily there's also pictures for them, which makes it much easier for you and I to look over these things together. So we'll start with the grass stage 2 line, which is Victory Bell. Victory Bell seems pretty annoying, actually. Status conditions are very strong in Cube, typically, just because of the limited number of switch outs that people have access to draft in the first place. So sometimes they are forced to flip that coin for confusion and stuff like that. And that's what this first Victory Bell does. This is a 2-prize Victory Bell because it has 140 hit points, but it can burn, confuse, and poison. There are 2 Verbank City gyms in the draft, so I think the Stadium War is quite important because there's actually Victory Bell, there's also Ariados, and there's also Skuntank G in the draft, which can all poison things. And poison seems like the best damage mod in this cube for sure. So being active in that Stadium War is going to be important. Trying to Grinch pick Verbanks if you're not drafting, like grass basically. Or if you can just pick up one for yourself, that's going to give you a huge win rate because your poison is an insane damage modifier when you have Verbank on your side for the damage output of these Pokemon. A lot of these damage outputs are around that sort of 60 to 80 mark for the stage 2s. Similar thing for the SP Pokemon. So having a free 3 damage between turns is essentially like getting an extra attack in if your opponent can't retreat out. So poison is wildly good in this draft. And it makes that early Pollen Hazard look unsuspecting, but it's actually a very powerful damage output attack if you can combine it with Verbank. There's also this Dark Porygon 2 over here, which I'll just quickly mention, that can flip a coin each turn and get back a Stadium from your discard pile. So if you draft Verbank, you want to try and get Porygon 2, that's for sure. Or if you draft, if you draft like Ariados and that sort of stuff, Porygon 2 becomes like a higher priority pick for you. Because winning that Stadium War and making sure Verbank is in play for as long as possible is going to be crazy good. So yeah, and then you've got 80 and heal 20 from this Pokemon. The defending Pokemon can't retreat. Again, leaning into that sort of poison status thing. If you can stick and absorb, 80 damage is a lot. There are damage mods, but 80 plus the poison of 30 and stopping that retreat means even stage 2s die coming back into your turn. So that stick and absorb is strong. So this is a 2-prize Pokemon, but it heals itself quite well. Deals a good chunk of damage. Grass actually does have acceleration from Celebi Prime as well. So yeah, this is a powerful Victory Bell, I would say. This Victory Bell also can heal itself, 60 and healing 30. Again, when attackers are mostly around that 70 damage range, healing is a big effect, especially if you can also get status off to augment this damage. So it feels typically if you're building Victory Bell, you're trying to lean into poison and other statuses as much as possible. The Wafting Scent can actually do more poison and confusion for you. You have to discard an energy attached to this guy, but maybe with Celebi, you're going to be okay. I think for Victory Bell, I really want to be drafting Celebi so I can chain attackers quite effectively. That's going to be one thing. Nectapod Victory Bell is Gusting. Stage 2 is on the bench. Gusting is quite limited. There aren't any trainer guaranteed gusts outside of countercatcher and power hand extension when you're behind on prize cards. There's also double gust, and supporter wise there aren't any bosses orders, Guzmas, anything like that. So Victory Bell bringing stage 2s up from the bench is pretty cool, and the final Victory Bell increases retreat cost and does more status conditions. So a ton of status stuff going on with the Victory Bells. It's weird. I've people have drafted this queue before and they've told me the Victory Bell is solid in most drafts that they play. I feel like it needs to draft a lot of things, and by the sounds of things, it will be competed for because people respect the Victory Bell. So I'll probably try and avoid it. One thing I will try and jump in on is Ariados. Even if I'm not playing grass, I'll try and play Ariados because poison is just nutty in this draft. I think these Poisonous Nest Ariados are some of the highest priority picks. If you can get your hands on those Verbanks. These Ariados probably don't hit hard enough, I don't think. So it's really just the Poisonous Nest ones. There's some nice Shaman that can give you extra healing if you are playing Victory Bell. So you can basically undo a full turn of your opponent's damage done to you if you're healing 30 and then getting the Shaman heal as well, which is pretty scary. So really big tanking archetype the Victory Bell is really. Shaman with the Energy Flare and Revenge Seed combo means that if Victory Bells do go down and hopefully you had extra attachments, or again if you have that Celebi Prime, really strong card in the draft, the Celebi Prime, you could go into Celebi and then attach return, use Celebi, get your Shaman level X out, and Energy Flare for 110, whilst at the same time being able to move those 2 energies to like a benched Weeping Bell or something like that to make sure your chain of attackers keep going. So yeah, this is a very good level X card as well. So the grass package seems pretty strong to me. Fire package wise, we'll jump back up to the top. Chandler is actually a split of Psychic and Fire, which is quite nice. It means sometimes you might be tempted to play a mixture of energy cards, which isn't always easy. But it means that you have 2 type coverages. So if you come up against a dark deck, you can try and use the fire ones. If you come up against a water deck, you can try and use the psychic ones. Curse Shadow is obviously a nuts ability, placing 3 damage counters around, just like I was saying with Poison. Very strong, but it can also interact with the bench quite well. So this is going to be a big in and out pivot kind of card in the best case scenario. Even if you're not using him to attack, you can just use him to increase your damage output. Fainting Spell on a coin flip, you can double down someone, which is a great thing for a prize race. And Curse Drop placing 6 damage counters is pretty awkward for your opponent. Again, you're probably trying to sprinkle around the back a lot of the time to deal with things they're trying to evolve. Flare Navigation gives you energy acceleration, but I don't think it's the best acceleration in the draft, especially for fire types that already have Blacksmith in the format. But again, this does 70 and heal 30 from itself. So you could quite happily Flare Navigation, not worry about the damage counters that you're putting on yourself, because Absorb Life will remove that straight away. So this feels very similar to this Victory Bell right over here. This one being able to self-accelerate might be a little bit stronger for you. In terms of, I mean, you could still play some other things to augment your damage. Like I said, you can have Curse Shadow and other stuff like that. This Chandelier seems very good. Doing 30 to 3 of your opponent's things is crazy, and Inferno 80 for 2 is pretty efficient. So I think Chandelier as well looks pretty powerful, to be honest. You have a random top entry Lampant, which can help out. And there's a lot of good Litwicks, actually, that have that Find a Friend attack or Call for Family. So there are 3 of those very nice Litwicks, which makes me a lot happier to be playing a stage 2 line in the draft, because you can have that turn 1 attack that means that you don't get donked and you get set up a little bit better. So 3 of these Litwicks are high priority Litwicks, which is pretty interesting. There's Magmortar level X. Essentially, you have to pretend that this is like a stage 2 Pokemon, because you're going into that stage 1, then level Xing into the active. Torrid Wave can burn things. Obviously, burn is a little bit worse because it's not guaranteed damage anymore, but it can do 100 damage snipes, which is very dangerous when Gusting isn't at play. Sniping things is huge. Sniping things like Claydol, Ariados, Delcatty, some of the most important things to be sniping in the draft, I would say. And that catches all of those quite easily. And again, if you have damage mods, you can be hitting that into the active position as well, I believe. So that's pretty crazy. If your opponent flips tails on burn, that could be insane. Or if you have the synergy with Heatran level X, that's where this becomes insane, because you should be able to chain Flame Busters, because this discards 2, and then Heatran puts them straight back on if you've been able to level X. The one thing about Magmortar and Heatran as a combination is that they both have high retreat costs. They'll get caught in that crossfire of status conditions, would be super annoying. So definitely things to bear in mind. But I like this as a huge sniper. He's a really powerful attacker. Magmortar as a stage 1 Pokemon gets on the board quite early with 110 hit points, pretty chunky. There is a dumbbells in the format, which could make this guy really huge. You have good acceleration as fire with Blacksmith that hopefully you could try and reload. So yeah, the Magmortar line I think is pretty solid as well. Honestly, I think a lot of these lines are solid and build around. So I think I'm just out the gate going to be quite passive because I know that most of these are fairly well balanced and I'll be able to build something together no matter what. Yeah, here's the Heatran package. This Heatran is very strong as a basic attacker. The level X lets you reload energy for big discards, but also means that flip actually... your opponent doesn't have to flip for burn. They treat it as tails, and they can't evolve out of burn. So essentially, the combination of Heatran and Magmortar essentially make it the same as like a Ariados Verbank combo. So burn is equally potentially powerful. Kingdra line, I think, is actually quite weak comparatively. For any sort of reasonable damage, Dragon Pump has to be discarding cards from your hand, which I think sucks. This Kingdra could be doing reasonable damage. 1 for 60 is efficient. Spray Splash is an extra damage counter each turn for free. But if you come up against anything that has fire type coverage, your damage output just goes to pot. So yeah, I think Kingdra is one that I will be avoiding. Also because a lot of the horses have low hit points and not much help with their early game attacks. Golduck Break can move all your energies around the board, which is potentially very, very strong. There are some big heal effects. There's Poketurn for SP Pokemon, and there is things like Acerola in the draft as well. So you could easily just Golduck everything away, heal, and Golduck everything back onto something else. If you're trying to play a tanky archetype, tanking should be pretty easy. Like I said, we've already talked about the healing from Chandler and the healing from Victory Bell. But also the heal effects that are available. So Golduck actually isn't that bad. The attacks on the regular Golducks aren't great. So you pretty much only do it just to get the break in play. But when you do, you could have some pretty wacky turns available to you, which is cool. I don't know if I'm going to be drafting Golduck. I imagine there will be like a 1-1 line that like comes around to me at some point, and I'll have to think about whether or not I want to build around it, because then it opens up the door for things like Acerola to be insanely strong. Outside of that, some healing that you can do. Has any water energy attached to it, so this one is more versatile than this one, which is only for active grass Pokemon. This one is things with water energies, so potentially a little bit better for healing. Bruxish is good spread. Suicune is good pressure. Suicune can recover some water Pokemon quite nicely. Beacon's obviously very good. So yeah. For lightning types, we've got ourselves Ampharos, which seems pretty expensive as an energy attacker. All of their abilities are... all of their bodies are placing damage counters on your opponent's stuff for attaching energies or using supporter cards in this case. They're all pretty expensive attackers. There's a couple of them are 2 prizes. This Ampharos is a 2-prizer. This one's also a 2-prizer. This Ampharos is essentially the Poker Power Lock, which is quite good. There's a ton of Poker Powers around, so denying those Poker Powers in a lock style effect could be pretty good. I think for Ampharos to work, you need to have a ton of stage 2s in play, which makes me think it's going to be pretty poor. So I'll be ignoring Ampharos, probably. Electivire also doesn't seem that good. It's again, you'd probably be like attacking with Electivire and having just the Ampharos on the bench, I would imagine, something like that. Because Shocking Tail basically just does the same thing as Conductivity from Ampharos. You can get free turns off with Pulse Barrier, but not that good. Motor Drive's solid energy acceleration. If you have, again, things like Golduck, you can combine Golduck with Electivire, where he charges himself up once every turn, then you move it onto other attackers, which is fun. But that's really about it. Some of the basic stuff, Rayquaza's very good. I don't know what else is all that good, though. This is like a comeback style attacking card, which is nice. Fighting seems pretty strong to me. Kabutops, I'm not sure if it's a bait or if it's actually insane, because it has a ton of locking approaches. Trainers, supporters, this is just good raw damage output, and this one even stops Pokemon from coming into play, which is Monka S. So if you just cheese this out earlier than your opponent, they then can't put any more Pokemon down. That could be disgusting, so I'm worried. But fossil types obviously have the huge disadvantage of being fossils, so you can't ball search out any of your, what are they called? Armor fossils? Yeah. But yeah, Lucario level X seems nuts. The fact that there's 2 of these in the draft is pretty crazy because you get a free turn with stance, just literally just a free turn, because your opponent can't hit you, which is nutty. And the Lucario is a high tempo damage output, kind of like 2 for 70, 1 for 30, 3 for 80, these sorts of things. High damage output, I think the best 2 is probably this one and this one. Just high tempo attacks really, and stance is the thing that stitches it together. Carbink also seems pretty reasonable. It's actually like a big basic in this format, which is funny. There's guard press and stone edge. 60 and reducing 20 doesn't sound crazy, but it's actually like pretty good again when a lot of things are hitting around that 60 mark. And there's things like Eviolite in the draft as well, which you could try and build towards. I think Carbink Break is an insanely good accelerator. It can attach 2 fighting energy to one of your benched fighting Pokemon, I think it is, or 2 energy to one of your bench fighting Pokemon. So that could maintain your Lucarios quite easily, or you could just have thick Carbink and try and accelerate to more Carbinks, or just have things like Stunfisk in the back, that sort of thing. So fighting's pretty nice. I think there's also a lot of help for the fighting stuff in general. There's Scorched Earth, there's Brooklet Hill, there's Stark Mountain. There's a few things that I like for the fighting types. And obviously, when everyone gets 4 special Dark Energies, there's more reason to have fighting Pokemon, just because you're hitting for a popular weakness. Gengar can spread a bunch. Curse Scar allows you to place damage counters around. There's 2 of them in the draft. And it has free retreat naturally and has hit and run approach, so pretty cool. This Gengar, again, Fating Spell, super annoying. Shadow Room being a pain for like Claydol players and Porygon players, that sort of thing, really annoy their engines quite easily. This is, again, just going to sit around in play and get you value with more damage counters being placed around. There's some decent Haunters and stuff around. This Ghastly is really nice, especially when you're playing hit and run. You can hit and run into this Ghastly and say, come and knock this out. If they do, you can go ahead and grab 2 Haunters to help you get even more setup. There's also Pitch Dark Ghastly, which is really, really good. So Gengars seem okay, even though they are weak to Dark. I think Banette is bait. I think they're going to be pretty bad. The exception is probably Banette EX. I know it gives up 2 prize cards, so it's a huge liability if anyone does get Gust. But it's extra damage counters that you can place around. There's also a little AMU package in here. Azelf Mesprit Uxie level X. I think it requires too many level X's to be in play, but Uxie level X, I have to respect the basic Uxies. Obviously, this one will be high priority no matter what, but these Uxies are worth picking up, possibly just because you could get Uxie level X, which is a draw engine. Cresselia level X is basically the same as Banette EX, but only gives up 1 prize, which is better, and it has natural free retreat if you get the My Way Cresselia, which is nuts. And Moonskip, if you actually play Psychic Energies, gives you an extra prize card if you knock something out. It's essentially the new Stoutland V in a level X form. This Mr. Mime is very good if you're playing Hit and Run Gengar as well. Just a quick note there. Mightyena can attack for free if it's poisoned, which you can do with Skuntank or with Ariados. And attacking for free is very good in this draft when there's a ton of things that attack for like 3 energies. Getting some free hits in there to finish off Pokemon is going to be crazy. So I think the 2 Cold Feet Mightyenas are really, really good. The other 2 seem pretty bad to me. This is the one that only gives up 1 prize. Even then, it's got a repel style effect in the ability, but not that good. The Honchkrow level X is interesting. It can do 60 and get any card back from your discard pile if you knock out that Pokemon. Damage output doesn't seem that good, only 60, but again, there's like 3 or 4 dark patches. There's those 4 special darks that we can play from the beginning of the draft, and there's 2 dark claws in the draft. So there's a ton of damage output increasing for the dark stuff. So Honchkrow is actually more dangerous than it looks, I think. The problem is a lot of the stage 1 Honchkrows, they could do little prods here and there, but they're not doing super high damage output attacks, unless like it's Raven's Claw where you've already put damage on the bench and that sort of thing. So I think you can't play straight Honchkrow. I think you have to play it with something else, and that might be a little bit awkward, I think. Duststone Murkrow could help you speed up that evolution, which is nice. There's a call for family style attack on one of them at least. So a couple nice things in there. There's some really high damage output early basics. Absol Prime, crazy, crazy damage output early. 70 base, but then again, 4 special darks that you get given for free, 2 Dark Claws in the draft, and more special darks that you can draft at the same time. Absol is hitting like a freaking truck, so be careful of that guy. Sableye can donk a ton of things as well, just because it naturally has 60 hit points and overconfident with 4 special darks in the draft and 2 dark claws means you will overconfident win the game so much. He is super duper high priority pick. He is pretty crazy. Sneasel and Mewtwo don't seem that good. Spiritomb obviously very good if you're building stage 2s. Junk Hunt is one of the only things you can do as a control player. I think Junk Hunt and possibly Porygon 2 are the 2 biggest priority things to pick if you want to build control. I think I would only try and build control if I saw Junk Hunt or Porygon 2 in those opening few picks, because then you can warp your entire draft around these cards. If Sableye becomes late or you're just waiting for it, like you pick up other control pieces as you go, but the Sableye never comes because it's just a good card in general. Other people will want to pick it. Then you're kind of screwed. So you have to see Sableye in the first 2 packs, I would say. We draft 6 packs. We have a total of 90 cards is our drafting pool, and then we make 60 card decks out of those. So you got to see that Sableye early if you want to build control. But trust me, if I see him, I will be building control. I've been baited before, and I'll be baited again by it. Mewtwo is pretty solid, just getting back supporters. Color stuff is interesting. Like I said, this Porygon 2 is crazy for Stadium War. There's some really good fighting stadiums. There's some good dark stadiums. There's some good, whatchamacallem stadiums. Rough Seas is crazy for lightning and for water. And Verbank is wildly good for poison. So you have to try and pick up this Porygon 2, I think. I think he's actually insanely good. Backup is obviously insanely good as well. Download, pretty good, but incredible if you're building control. There is a... if you can get Floatzel GL level X and Porygon 2 as download, I think that's just a deck. Because the Floatzel gets you back 2 supporters for no energy. Its attack is Insight. And Porygon 2 lets you use an extra supporter effect each turn, essentially. It's like a Dual Brains Magnezone style effect. Which is nuts, right? You get 2 supporters back, then you're able to play those supporters the very next turn. And that becomes the emphasis of the control deck, because you can be getting back Flagrant, you can be getting back Plumeria, those sorts of cards, and be a real pain for your opponents. So Porygon 2 is actually the face of the control deck that I want to try and build. Again, probably have to see it early. It's probably relatively competed for, because it is some extra help, and there's not a huge amount of draw in the draft. So far, what have we seen for draw? We've seen Uxie level X, right? And we've seen backup now from the Porygon, but now you'll see some others like Dark Kadabra, and there's Claydol and Delcatty in the draft as well. So yeah, this will be relatively competed for, unfortunately, but I want to try and pick it for sure. I'll try and pick up Porygons when I can. There's some high damage output Dreamer attackers, the Rayquaza and the Lugia. Regigigas is pretty fun, awkward attack cost, but he can be a huge wall. Like 150 hit points is crazy. You can keep sacrificing to keep it in play. You have to find ways to pivot in and out of him, which is the problem, but otherwise pretty cool. Smeargle with Second Coat can make those dreams a reality. Actually a really nice card if you're playing SP, I think, as well. And yeah, there's some good setup Pokemon here. There's some Eeks going on, there's some Dittos going on, that sort of thing. For the SP stuff, insane stuff, to be honest. The Charizard G level X is really interesting. He can yoink energies from all over the place. Obviously, it hits 150, so that's a truck. It's 5 energy, which is insanely high, but you can reduce that with energy gain. You can reduce that with Blacksmith, and he can yoink energy from everywhere else. So far we've seen Celebi Prime, we've seen Electivire, we've seen Regirock as well for the fighting stuff. And there's also Stark Mountain, actually, that can just Stark Mountain those energies over as well if you have to from other Pokemon. So yeah, Charizard G is actually not that bad, I want to say. Yeah, he's actually not that bad. If I'm a real dreamer, I might just pick him up because he seems super fun. Because it's really high damage output, and I feel like a lot of people will be building stage 2s. And yeah, Charizard can actually detonate that. Staraptor has Fast Call that lets you grab a supporter each turn. That's busted. There's 2 Garchompsies, completely broken card in this draft. When there's stage 2s around, most things have 80 or less hit points as the stage 1 form. You can just Grinch those, and you're Grinching Porygon 2 engines, Claydol engines, and Delcatty engines super easily. This card is crazy, and even better if you're able to draft any more SP Pokemon. Blaziken seems solid. You can try and combine it with some of the burn stuff that we talked about earlier. Absol G level X is quite funny. This could be one of the ways that you junk hunt control people. When it comes into play, it flips 3 coins and puts the top card of your opponent's deck in the lost zone for each heads. So you can try and junk hunt back Poke Turn and spam Absol G level X for a ton of Darkness Sends to the lost zone as your mill condition, which I think is fun. But as an attacker, it's actually not that bad. 30, you can discard 1 and do 30 more. Again, there's so much damage mods for dark types that are very good. Luxray GL, one of the best gusting options in the game. Gallade with that Blade Storm and aimed cuts, actually pretty high tempo damage output. There is D-Valley in the draft. There's also Energy Gain in the draft. So you can attack with this guy relatively quickly. And there's a ton of things that place damage counters, right? There's any Ampharos things you could play. You could play Ampharos, Gallade. You could try and play Gengar Gallade. You could try and play it with Kingdra or Chandelure. There's a ton of synergy cards for Gallade. So I think he's actually pretty solid and can do some sound damage output. A little bit bodied by healing effects, but otherwise not too bad. Floatzel GL, I think good for the control deck that I want to build, but also potentially good just to get the level X into play if you're playing these Kingdras. I probably won't be looking towards that, so I'll only look towards getting Floatzel GL if I'm playing aggro Suicune, which I've thought about, or if I'm playing whatchamacallit, control. Yeah, so other water types, there's a couple Palkia Gs in the draft, which is going to be annoying for bench management for sure. It stops those big Dreamer setups plays quite nicely, and Hydro Shot's pretty powerful. Dialga G, obviously you can have early game Trainer Lock with the regular Dialga, and stopping a ton of Pokebodies is annoying, so that card's good. Infinite, good damage output, Gusting in there as well, pretty okay card. Honchkrow and Weavile both seem insane to me as well because they have early game attacks that you can use on turn 1 going first, and they are dark types, so they have all those mods that we talked about. Bronzong, very good. Skuntank, insane. Both these Toxic Growths are insane. What else have we got going on here? Yeah, Claydol and Delcatty are huge draw engines. I'll have to try and pick up early Baltoys and early Skitties if I can, because they're relatively thin lines, so I can't really pass those guys up. Weavile's an interesting one. It turns things into dark types, so you can have those Dark Claws and stuff available, but I don't think I'll go for them. Electrode, I think, is a bait. Alakazam can stop a ton of powers, and Dark Kadabra is actually a decent card. Just you can discard 1, draw 1, which isn't insane, but it's okay. And blocking some powerful Poké Powers is going to be pretty nice. I don't think I'll ever actually put Alakazam into play unless I'm going huge Dreamer Believer deck with like Super Boost and stuff. So ton of good attackers overall. I can draft pretty wide. I'm going to obviously hone in on level X SP attacking Pokemon. But from there, I could be playing like a ton of stage 2s. Other things to bear in mind, there's 2 Cyrus. Again, more help for some of these stage 1s. There is a Sorola. Is there any other healing in the draft in terms of picking things up? I think there's Seeker as well, right? So yeah, there's Blacksmith for the fire decks. Lusamine in here. Yeah, Seeker is some additional healing. There's a Hex in here as well, which is pretty gross. There's a couple damage buff supporters, which I think is pretty high value, like Giovanni's Ski. So yeah, there's actually there's Centilady as well, and Gardenia. So there's a ton of healing effects if you want to try and play Golduck Break, where you move, and there's Mr. Briney's. So there's a lot of healing effects if you want to try and play Golduck. I actually think that's pretty viable, where you can just literally pick something up, move all the energy off, pick something up, move all the energy back on. I'll have to value Golduck pretty high. For the dark stuff, yeah, there's a ton of patches. There's 2 Poketurns in the draft. There's a number of rare candies, a good amount of Pokemon recovery, I would say. The comeback Gust is only the Gust is only comeback potential. A ton of Premier Balls, so playing any level X's. Yeah, there's 4, so all the level X's are super good. There is Crushing Hammer. Is that the only like controlling type? There's E-Hammer as well, so there are a couple controlling type item cards you can try and spam. Obviously, Power Spray is also potentially very good if you draft very thick SP. This is a disruptive card you can try and have for controlling decks. So yeah, like I said, stadium-wise, Stadium War's going to be huge, to be honest, because Rough Seas is nuts, Verbank is nuts, D-Valley's nuts. Yeah, just like huge competition for Stadium. So I'm going to rate that Porygon 2 pretty high. There's some nutty tools as well. I've mentioned Dark Claw a bunch, but there's also Karate Belt Sash if you're playing fighting stuff. There's Dumbbells for any stage 1. There's 2 E-Gains, which is nutty. Crystal's crazy. A ton of Focus Band is, yeah. Tools are also insane. So I think the Eco Arm is also going to be in order. That's going to be nutty. And if you draft Focus Band Sableye as a control deck, like that's wild, right? Yeah. For special energy cards, there's a good amount of comeback energy cards, like 2 counters. There's 1 scramble in here as well, which is nuts. So if you are trying to build slower stage 2s, it's actually viable thanks to some of these cards. Strong energy is obviously crazy. Warp energies can be annoying. There's 3 DC effects. 2 DCs, 1 twin, and counter energies obviously also work on Garchomp's Sea Level X. I'm trying to think about how often I can just pop things. But I could also try and use things like Celebi for energy acceleration. There's actually... So the main things to bear in mind is, Pokemon-wise, there's very few draw support stage 2 Pokemon. Most of the stage 2s come into play only to be attacking. So it's going to be important to get some backup draw throughout the game. And acceleration-wise, also very, very limited. It's like Electivire, Regirock, Celebi. Is there anything else for energy acceleration? I don't think there is, right? I think it's only those. So yeah. And a ton of dark patches, 1 aqua patch. This is actually an accelerator, but that's with an attack, which isn't all that good. So yeah, everything's gonna it's gonna be really important to keep an eye on. Also Carbink attaches for an attack. So yeah, efficient energy attack cost is gonna be important. I think Poison Mightyena Sleeper combo, which is just nuts, because you can attack for free and whilst manually attaching to bench stuff. But yeah, draw engine has to be the priority. I have to be very, very cautious with my draw supporters. I think for things like My Cube, I can be quite liberal with draw supporters, knowing that if I get the Pokemon into play, they'll draw me cards throughout the rest of the game. Whereas that's not the case so much in this draft, so I'll be having to be even more cautious and pick a ton of supporter cards to make sure my deck just works more than other people. There is a lot of ball search cards available. There's a ton of recovery for level X's, so I'll try and keep an eye on those for sure. Stadiums and Tools are high priority picks no matter what, and there's a ton of good special energy as well. For attacking Pokemon, I mean, I could draft so much for attacking Pokemon, but the lines are, the level X is released for a spanner in the works, which is interesting. And I basically just have to pick what's open. The only things I'll be straight up ignoring is probably Ampharos, unless I'm drafting it with Gallade, and probably Kingdra. But I may still pick these ones up. So yeah, those will probably be the only write-offs for me. What else am I thinking? I think Honchkrow is probably weak as well. I'll try not to get baited by Regigigas because of his energy attack cost. A Banette I will ignore. I'll probably ignore Electivire. I won't ignore this one though. This one's pretty good. So yeah, I'm going to be drafting open, that's for sure. I'll probably ignore the AMU stuff, but I'll probably try and pick up Uxies. This Crest combo is insane as well. Just having a free retreat pivot for Full Moon Dance is nuts. So yeah, just a ton of good stuff. Really looking forward to this draft because it's quite different from many of the other drafts I've played before. I went in super high detail there at the Pokemon lines, but that's because I'm really taking this draft seriously because it's basically like the most prestigious cube tournaments that we have in the league. So yeah, hopefully going to be a lot of fun. Thanks so much for watching, guys. And yeah, we'll see how it goes. I'll be doing a video of the deck that I eventually build, and then hopefully some of the rounds as well. It will be on Untap, so possibly I'll do like a recap of it all. I'll see. But if you guys like the cube content, let me know down below. And yeah, wish me luck. Cheers.